What historical fact makes you cry? The Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. The doors to the exit and the stairwells were locked, so you either had to jump out the window or be burned alive. A story from my great-grandfather who fought in Ww1. Soldiers would cease fire to pick up their men's bodies and would have a smoke together. Go back to their trenches and start firing again. Neither side of front-line soldiers actually wanted to be there. Just drafted for war. Teddy Roosevelt's mother Mittie and his wife Alice, who had just given birth days before, both died in the same house on the same day, hours apart from each other. In his diary entry that day, he drew a large black X and scribbled, "The light has gone out of my life." That's some heavy shit right there, man. It doesn't exactly make me cry. But Albert Göring, the staunchly anti-Nazi brother of Hermann Göring, spent the Second World War helping Jews and dissidents to escape. He was caught several times, but was let off the hook due to his brother's influence within the Reich. After the war, he was shunned for his last name and his accomplishments forgotten. One of the girls in the Donner Party was fed her dead mother and told afterwards. They had an agreement to not feed people their family members, but they had broken off from the camp in an attempt to find rescue. She would randomly burst into tears about it at school years later. The whole story of the Donner Party is so horrible and sad, and it bothers me that it's just used for cannibal jokes. Virginia Woolf's suicide and the note she left behind makes me fucking weep like a baby. Just the way she expresses sentiments of happiness and love to her husband, but also her guilt and struggle with mental illness, it just kills me. The Gritty Past is a really good sub for this type of content since it highlights more morbid anecdotes and facts from the past. One that really stands out to me from the sub is this image of the Filipino zoo girl that was on display in the Coney Island Zoo in 1914. She was bound by ropes and people tossed peanuts at her. It's just heartbreaking to see something like that happen, especially to a child so young. But human zoos were a thing up until as late as 1958. Most if not all the astronauts aboard the Challenger survived the explosion. It was the crash into the water that would have killed them. Irish unmarried moms were sometimes required to live in institutions, raising their own babies until they were adopted. Imagine knowing how cute your kid was, taking care of it, knowing you couldn't keep it. Sometimes they were as old as 2 or 3 when adopted. The movie Philomena dealt with this topic. When Alexander Hamilton's eldest son died, his second child Angelica Hamilton had a mental breakdown and she never recovered. Sometimes, her family would walk into a room with only her in it, and she would be speaking to her dead brother. The oldest recorded name for a cat was from ancient Egypt. The cat's name was Nejum, which means sweetie. The assassination of Aurelian. So pointless. He could have achieved so much. The torture and murder of Junko Furuta. What they did to her would make the cartels cringe. But the worst part of her sordid case is that all of the people involved in her death were given slaps on the wrist and are roaming the streets of Japan today. N. Wikipedia. Org wiki murder _of Junko Furuta. Edit. Thank you to everyone who gave this post awards. I appreciate it very much. Have a nice day. Ww1 Mercy Dogs. They would go out into no man's land and find wounded soldiers. They would bring medical supplies for the soldiers to patch themselves up. Or if the soldier was too mortally wounded, stay and comfort them in their final moments. The end of a Sappho poem. Beyond all hope. I prayed those timeless days we spent might be made twice as long. I prayed one word. I want. Someone, I tell you, will remember us, even in another time. That quote always make me tear up. There's no more wolves in Ireland. There were approximately 300 infants and children that were murdered in Jonestown, being forcibly fed or injected with cyanide. I feel so much pain for all the victims, but the kids in particular make me ache with despair. This story about Sir Nicholas Winton who saved over 600 children from the Holocaust. No one knew of his story until 50 years later when his wife found notebooks detailing the 669 kids he helped escape the Nazis. Henry Gunther was an American soldier killed during World War I at 10:59 a.m. on November 11, 1918, 1 minute before the armistice took effect at 11:00 a.m. Gunther charged a German roadblock outfitted with machine guns. German soldiers tried waving him off, knowing the war would come to an end in mere moments. Apparently he got too close. Fired a couple rounds. and was promptly shot and killed instantly. The story of Hatchik, the dog who waited patiently for his owner 9 years after his death. I'm sure many are familiar with this story because of the movies and the episode of Futurama. Jurassic Bark, which was inspired by this story. Through genealogy, I found an old newspaper reporting an accident that happened. My 4X great-grandmother and grandfather were crossing the river into Maine from Canada when their wagon tipped. He and 5 children survived. My 4X great-grandmother and month-old baby did not. That tugged at my heart. I cannot imagine the devastation he and his children felt as they were moving. There was also a lot of stillborns and a lot of children who never saw past the age of 10. It's quite a sad journey at times. It used to be common for a raped woman to be allowed to marry her rapist so as to not get in trouble for being raped. During World War II, the Japanese army had comfort stations, which served as prisons for women who were taken against their will. They would routinely form lines to take turn in raping and torturing the women trapped in these prison cells. This is just one of Japan's horrid actions during the war. Unit 731 and the Nanjing Massacre are other examples. The Radium Girls trying to make an honest living. No one higher up cared what happened or took responsibility. The Treatment of Children, in particular, by Joseph Mengele at the concentration camps during WW2. Fucking brutal. And now that I have kids of my own, it tears me up anytime I hear about it. Almost a quarter of Europe's military-aged males died in World War I. The total number of deaths includes from 9 to 11 million military personnel. The civilian death toll was about 6 to 13 million. The casualties in individual battles were insane. For example, approximately 306,000 people died at the Battle of Verdun over the course of 1916. At the Battle of the Somme, almost 1 million were wounded or killed. Breakup of the Kalmar Union. Basically this kick-ass Danish queen united Denmark, Norway, Sweden and Finland, only for her shitty heir to fuck it all up. Pictures of a box of wedding rings taken from the corpses of Jewish people in concentration camps. It just makes me so sad that the only remembrance of their spouse, who could be dead for all they know, is stolen from them and they are unceremoniously buried without their ring. Then the rings are carelessly stored in a wooden box to be melted down. The killing fields and the tree the Red Khmer used to kill infants and small children by smashing them against it. One of the most haunting things I've ever read about. Rape of Nanking.